Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, there is a specific spot in Rome that I always tell people they have to visit. Not for the beauty necessarily, but just for the sheer overwhelming scale of it.
You're talking about the Altità del Patria.
I am. You stand in the middle of Piazza Venezia, you look up, and your vision is just totally eclipsed by this blindingly white mountain of marble.
They call it the wedding cake or the typewriter. It has a lot of nicknames, and not all of them are flattering. It's aggressive architecture.
It is aggressive. It screams at you. But the focal point of that massive structure is the guy on the horse, Victor Emmanuel II. And the inscription right there says, Padre della Patria, Father of the Fatherland.
Mm.
And if you just look at the statue, you think, okay, this is the Italian George Washington. This is the stoic hero who stitched a fractured peninsula together into a nation for the first time since, what, the Roman Empire? That is the billboard version?
It is the billboard version, and it's the version that was drilled into generations of Italian school children. But then you actually dig into the diplomatic cables from the 1860s.
Right.
Specifically the archives from the British Foreign Office, and you meet a completely different human being.
And that's what really shocked me in the prep for this. I was reading these reports from Lord Clarendon, the British Foreign Secretary.
Yes.
He visits Florence in 1867, meets the political elite, and writes back to London. And he isn't describing a hero. He's describing a liability.
To put it mildly.
He calls Victor Emmanuel an imbecile, a dishonest man who lies to everyone. And this was the kicker, someone who is universally seen as likely to ruin the dynasty.
It is a massive, massive disconnect. You have the father of the nation on one hand.
And a dishonest imbecile on the other.
And honestly, the goal of this deep dive isn't to figure out which one is true, because, spoiler alert, they both are, in a way, but to understand how a rough, hunting-obsessed, skirt-chasing king managed to survive long enough to become a legend.
That is the key word, survival. Because looking at a starting point, he shouldn't have lasted a week.
No, the odds were terrible. To understand Victor Emmanuel, you have to understand the disaster he inherited. He wasn't born into a unified Italy. He was born into the House of Savoy, ruling the Kingdom of Sardinia.
Right, which is often called Piedmont Sardinia.
Exactly. And in 1849, his father, King Charles Albert, makes a catastrophic mistake. He decides to fight the Austrian Empire to liberate northern Italy, and he gets absolutely crushed at the Battle of Novara.
And this isn't just a lost battle, right? This is like a regime-ending defeat.
Oh, totally. The humiliation is so absolute that Charles Albert feels he literally cannot look his subjects in the eye. He abdicates on the spot.
Just quits?
Quits. He flees to Portugal and dies soon after. So Victor Emmanuel inherits the crown in a tent on a battlefield with the enemy army marching toward his capital.
Talk about a rough first day at the office.
I mean, the treasury is empty, the army is shattered, and the Austrians are dictating terms. He becomes king on March 23, 1849. His very first act is to sit down with Field Marshal Radetzky, the Austrian commander.
The guy who just destroyed his father.
The very same guy. And he has to basically beg for an armistice.
And he actually pulls it off.
He does. He negotiates the armistice of Vignale. And this is where we see the first glimpse of his style. He manages to get relatively favorable terms. He keeps his territory intact.
Okay, so that's a small win.
It is, but the catch is he has to go back to Turin and sell this peace treaty to his own people, and they are not buying it.
Why not? Because the politicians in Piedmont wanted to keep fighting.
The Chamber of Deputies, the parliament, refused to ratify the treaty. They thought it was dishonorable. They were sort of living in this fantasy world where they could still beat Austria.
Okay.
Now, Victor Emmanuel is a young king. He's a soldier, and he looks at this parliamentary deadlock and thinks, I don't have time for this.
So what does he do? Does he try to persuade them?
He bulldozes them. He fires his prime minister and brings in a new guy, Massimo de Celio. Then he issues the Proclamation of Moncalieri.
Which is what?
He dissolves the parliament and forces new elections. Effectively, he tells the voters, send me a parliament that will sign this treaty or I'm going to shut this whole democratic experiment down.
Wow. That sounds, well, it sounds like a threat.
It was a threat. And it worked. The voters got scared and elected a more moderate chamber that signed the peace. But it shows you right away, he wasn't a soft touch. He was willing to strong-arm the democratic institutions when he felt it was necessary for survival.
And speaking of strong-arming, we have to talk about Genoa. Because the outline mentions a revolt there in 1849, and the king's reaction is intense.
This is crucial for understanding his character. See, Genoa wasn't happy about being part of the Kingdom of Sardinia in the first place.
Right, they were historically a republic.
Exactly. They resented the Savoy monarchy. When they heard about the defeat against Austria, they didn't rally around the king. They revolted. They kicked out the royal garrison and declared a provisional government.
So his own subjects are seizing the moment to break away while he's dealing with the Austrians.
Precisely. And this is where the father of the fatherland mask slips completely. He sends the army to Genoa, not to negotiate, but to crush the city. He orders a bombardment.
A bombardment of his own city.
Yes. And in a private letter from this time, he writes a line that historians still wince at. He refers to the rebels, his own subjects, as a vile and infected race of canaille.
Canaille meaning scoundrels.
Rabble. Scoundrels, rabble dogs. It captures his mindset perfectly. He wasn't a Democrat. He was an old-school authoritarian soldier. He viewed disorder as a disease that needed to be cauterized.
Okay, so I'm confused. We have a king who bullies parliament, bombs his own citizens, and calls them a vile race. How on earth does this guy end up with a reputation as a liberal hero? That pivot makes no sense.
That is the accidental genius of Victor Emmanuel II. He hated the disorder, but, and this is the big but, he kept the rule book, the Statuto Albertino, the constitution his father had granted.
He didn't tear it up.
He didn't. And you have to look at the context of 1849 Europe. The revolutions had failed. Every other monarch, the Pope, the King of Naples, the Grand Duke of Tuscany, they were all tearing up their constitutions, arresting liberals, and going back to absolute rule.
So he was the only one who didn't.
He was the last man standing, maybe out of honor to his father, maybe because he realized it was a useful pressure valve, but by simply not tearing it up, he unintentionally turned Piedmont into a sanctuary. It became the only safe space in Italy.
I see. So if you were a poet, a journalist, or a radical thinker fleeing from Naples or Rome, you went to Turin.
Exactly. You went to Piedmont because it was the only place you wouldn't be thrown in a dungeon for speaking your mind. So even though the king personally was a rough authoritarian, structurally, his kingdom became the beacon of liberty.
And he attracted the best and brightest minds of the generation.
He did. Which brings us to the most important partnership of his life. The man who would become the brain to Victor Emmanuel's brawn.
Enter Count Cavour, Camillo Benso.
Indeed.
The outline describes them as partners, but everything I read suggests they couldn't stand being in the same room.
Partners is a very polite diplomatic term. They were oil and fire. You have to visualize Cavour. He's this short, bespectacled, pot-bellied intellectual. He speaks French better than Italian. He loves banking. He loves railroads. He reads The Economist. He's a modern European technocrat.
Okay, I have that picture. And the king.
The king is distinct. He's huge, with this massive handlebar mustache that he waxed upward. He eats like a peasant, literally mountains of pasta and beans. He speaks in a coarse Piedmontese dialect, and he absolutely hates being indoors.
So not a fan of long meetings.
If he wasn't shooting a wild boar or chasing a mistress, he was bored out of his mind.
So Cavour is trying to explain complex macroeconomic reforms or diplomatic nuance, and the king is just checking his watch to go hunting.
It was worse than that. Cavour would treat the king like a junior employee. There's a famous anecdote where Cavour was droning on about policy and the king trying to interject with an opinion. Cavour just glared at him and said, "Sir, I am the one who knows about these things."
He said that to the king. I'm surprised the king didn't have him arrested.
Oh, he wanted to. He called Cavour a tyrant in private. He complained that Cavour made him feel like a prisoner in his own palace.
So why keep him around?
Because here's the insight. The king tolerated it. He recognized that Cavour was the smartest man in the room. That is a rare quality in a monarch, putting your ego aside because you know you need the other guy's brain to survive.
And together they hatch one of the wildest schemes in diplomatic history, the Crimean War.
This is networking 101, but with artillery. It's 1855. Britain and France are fighting Russia in the Crimea, modern-day Ukraine.
I looked at the map, but I'm still confused. Piedmont is a small state near France. They have zero beef with Russia. Why on earth do they send 15,000 men to die in the mud in Sevastopol?
It's a great question. And Cavour was actually reluctant. He knew it was expensive and dangerous. Why poke the Russian bear? But the king...
He was for it.
The king was all in. He wanted glory. He wanted to prove that the Italian army wasn't a joke after the defeat in 1849.
But surely there was a strategy beyond just glory.
Yes, and this is where the genius comes in. Cavour eventually realized that if they sent troops, they were buying an admission ticket.
An admission ticket to what?
To the big kids' table. If you shed blood alongside Britain and France, they owe you. Or at least they have to let you speak. After the war, at the Paris Peace Conference in 1856, little Piedmont gets a seat right next to the great powers.
And Cavour uses that moment to complain about Austria.
Precisely. He doesn't ask for land immediately. He plays the victim. He tells the British and French, look, Italy is a powder keg because of Austrian oppression. If you don't help us fix it, you're going to have revolutions that will destabilize all of Europe. He scares them into listening.
Which sets the stage for the real game.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't kick Austria out of Italy alone. You need a big friend.
And thanks to Crimea, they had one. Napoleon III of France.
This leads to the secret meeting at Plombières in 1858. And this part reads like a spy thriller.
It really does. Cavour and the French Emperor Napoleon III meet secretly at a spa town. No aides, no minutes, just two men carving at the map of Europe.
What's the deal they cut?
It's a transaction. Pure, real politic. Napoleon III agrees to bring the massive French army to help fight Austria and free northern Italy. In exchange.
There's always an in exchange.
Always. In exchange, Piedmont has to give France two territories, Nice and Savoy.
Savoy. But that's the ancestral home of the House of Savoy. That's like, I don't know, Scottish king giving away Edinburgh to get London.
It was an amputation. You have to understand, the dynasty had ruled Savoy for 800 years. It was their cradle.
But did the king hesitate?
He was heartbroken. He reportedly walked around the palace in a daze when he heard the terms. But he signed. And that tells you everything about his ambition.
That he was willing to trade the past for the future.
Exactly. He valued the future kingdom of Italy more than the past kingdom of Savoy. That is the moment, I think, where he truly stops being a Savoyard duke and starts being an Italian king.
So the deal is signed. The Second War of Independence kicks off in 1859. And initially, it goes well.
It goes great. The French and Piedmontese armies are smashing the Austrians. They take Milan. They're pushing east. It looks like they are going to liberate Venice. The dream is happening.
But then, the betrayal.
Napoleon III gets cold feet. The casualties are higher than he expected. The Battle of Solferino was a bloodbath, shocking even by 19th century standards.
Okay.
And he sees Prussia mobilizing on the German border. He gets nervous. So without telling Cavour, without telling the king, he meets with the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph at Villafranca and signs a separate peace.
Just cuts the legs out from under his allies.
Completely. The deal is Piedmont gets Lombardy, Milan, but Austria keeps Venetia. The war stops halfway through.
Cavour must have been furious.
Furious doesn't cover it. He went into a rage. He stormed into the king's quarters, disheveled, screaming, disrespecting the monarch. He demanded the king continue the war alone.
Which would have been suicide.
Absolute suicide. The Piedmontese army couldn't beat Austria without France. And this is the moment where Victor Emmanuel earns his keep. Cavour is hysterical, acting on principle. The king is pragmatic.
He sees the reality of the situation.
He realizes he has been screwed, but he also realizes that half a loaf is better than no bread.
So he accepts the treaty.
He accepts it. He swallows the bitter pill. Cavour resigns in protest, literally quits the government, but the king stays in the saddle. He secures Milan. He banks the win. It's that survival instinct again.
But even though the war stopped, the momentum didn't.
Yeah.
This is the domino effect mentioned in the outline.
Right. Cavour was out, but the fire he lit was still burning. The central Italian states, Tuscany, Modena, Parma, they saw the Austrians getting beaten, and they decided to jump ship. They held plebiscites.
Popular vote.
And voted to join Piedmont.
So the kingdom doubles in size almost overnight. But we are still missing the bottom half of the boot, the South. And this brings us to the wild card, the man in the red shirt. Giuseppe Garibaldi.
The Garibaldi problem. This is where the story shifts from a diplomatic chess game to a full-blown action movie.
Victor Emmanuel is in a weird spot here, isn't he? Garibaldi wants to take a volunteer army, the famous 1,000, and conquer the South. Officially, the king can't support this. It's illegal. It's piracy.
Unofficially, it's don't ask, don't tell. The king publicly writes letters saying, don't do it, Giuseppe, while privately sending signals saying, good luck, let me know when you win.
A plausible deniability thing.
Totally.
And Garibaldi, well, he does the impossible.
It is militarily absurd. He lands in Sicily with 1,000 guys in red shirts and bad muskets, and he conquers the entire island against a professional army of 25,000.
Wow.
Then he crosses to the mainland and takes Naples. The Bourbon kingdom just collapses like a house of cards.
So Garibaldi is essentially handing the South to Victor Emmanuel on a silver platter. What's the problem?
The problem is that Garibaldi doesn't know when to stop. He's a revolutionary. He hates the Pope. After taking Naples, he announces he's going to march on Rome.
And that's a red line.
It's a nuclear red line. Rome is protected by a French garrison. Napoleon III is the protector of the church. If Garibaldi attacks Rome, France declares war on Italy. Everything they've built, Milan, Florence, the whole new kingdom, could be destroyed in a week.
So the king has to become the police officer.
Exactly. Victor Emmanuel has to physically march his royal army south to intercept Garibaldi before he gets to Rome. It's a race.
And on the way down, he actually has to fight the Pope's army.
He does. The Battle of Castelfidardo. He has to invade the Papal States to get to Garibaldi. He crushes the Pope's army, takes the regions of Marche and Umbria, but leaves Rome itself alone. He's very careful about that.
Which leads to one of the most famous scenes in Italian history, the meeting at Teano.
It's the climax of the unification. Picture a dusty road in the countryside. You have the king riding south on his horse, surrounded by his generals in gold braid. You have Garibaldi riding north with his ragtag volunteers.
The tension must have been incredible. I mean, Garibaldi is a Republican at heart. He could have declared a republic in the South. He could have said, I conquered this, it's mine.
He could have. It could have been a civil war. But Garibaldi rode up, took off his hat, and hailed Victor Emmanuel as King of Italy.
Just like that.
Just like that. He handed over his conquests. It was the ultimate act of self-sacrifice for the sake of unity.
And so on March 17, 1861, the Kingdom of Italy is officially proclaimed. Victor Emmanuel is the first king of Italy.
But, and here is where we really need to pause, he makes a massive unforced error right at the start, an error that I think confirms Lord Clarendon's imbecile comment.
The name thing.
The name thing. He is crowned the first king of a brand new country. Logic dictates, and many advisors suggested, that he should become Victor Emmanuel I of Italy, a fresh start, a new era.
A clean slate, but he doesn't do it.
No, he insists on remaining Victor Emmanuel II. He keeps the numbering from the Kingdom of Sardinia.
Why? Was it just ego? Pride?
It was dynastic pride. He viewed the unification not as a new birth, but as an expansion of his house. He was saying the House of Savoy has simply gotten bigger.
But think about the message that sends. If you're a person in Naples or Sicily or Florence, you've just joined this new nation, and the king is saying, I haven't changed. I have simply absorbed you.
It was a disaster. It signaled that this wasn't a marriage of equals, it was a hostile takeover. This is what historians call Piedmontization.
Right.
They took the Piedmontese constitution, the Piedmontese tax system, the Piedmontese bureaucracy, and just copy-pasted it onto the South.
So instead of feeling liberated, the South felt occupied.
Exactly. That, too, on the end of his name, was a daily reminder that they were second-class citizens in a Savoyard empire. It fueled the Southern question, the brigandage, the resentment that frankly still exists in Italy today. It was a failure of imagination. He couldn't imagine being anything other than a Piedmontese king.
It's a fascinating blunder. He gets the land, but he loses the hearts.
Precisely. And in many ways, that's a story that's still playing out.
So we have a kingdom of Italy, but it's missing some key pieces, specifically Venice and Rome. How does he complete the puzzle?
Well, he goes back to the old playbook. Wait for the big powers to fight each other and then pick a side.
Opportunism at its finest.
In 1866, we get the Third War of Independence. This time, Italy allies with Prussia against Austria.
And how does the Italian army do?
Terrible. They lose the battles on land and at sea. It's actually quite embarrassing. But Prussia is a machine. They smash Austria at the Battle of Sadowa.
So Italy loses the battle but wins the war.
Basically, yeah. At the peace table, because Italy was on the winning team, they get Veneto Venice anyway.
Victory through association. I'm with the winner.
Exactly. And then the big one, Rome, 1870, the final piece.
This would be the Franco-Prussian War.
Right. Prussia attacks France. Napoleon III is getting hammered. He has to pull his French garrison out of Rome to defend Paris. And suddenly, the Pope is unprotected.
And Victor Emmanuel doesn't hesitate this time.
He sends the army in. September 20th, 1870, the breach of Porta Pia. Italian troops blast a hole in the ancient walls and march into Rome. The Pope declares himself a prisoner in the Vatican, but the unification is effectively complete. Rome becomes the capital in 1871.
And the king moves into the Quirinal Palace,
which used to be the Pope's summer home. Talk about a power move. He literally moves into the Pope's bedroom.
I want to pivot now to the man himself, because we have talked about the wars and the treaties, but the outline mentions his colorful personal life. And frankly, colorful seems like a polite British understatement.
It is very polite. Victor Emmanuel II was a man of robust appetites. While Cavour was trying to project this image of a civilized, modern European state to the world, The king was essentially running a frat house.
Let's start with his relationship with the church, because that connects to his personal life. He wasn't exactly in the Pope's good graces, was he?
Putting it mildly, when he invaded the Papal States, the church fought back with the ultimate weapon, excommunication.
So the King of Italy, a Catholic country, was kicked out of the church.
Yep. For years, he was spiritually cut off. This was a huge deal for a 19th century monarch. He was genuinely afraid of hell. He was very superstitious, but he wanted Rome more. It created a massive crisis of conscience for millions of Italians. Could you be a good Catholic and a good Italian at the same time?
But clearly, the fear of hell didn't stop him from enjoying his earthly life. Let's talk about the women. He was married, right?
He was married in 1842 to his cousin, Adelaide of Austria. By all accounts, she was a pious, quiet woman who suffered in silence. She gave him 8 children and died young in 1855.
And after that, he was a free agent.
Well, even during the marriage, he was notoriously unfaithful. But the love of his life wasn't a princess or a duchess. It was Rosa Vercellana. Everyone called her Bella Rosin, Beautiful Rose.
Who was she?
She was a commoner, the daughter of a drum major in the army. He met her when she was 14 and he was 27, which is problematic by modern standards, obviously. But they were together for the rest of his life.
And he didn't hide her.
Not at all. He sent her up in palaces, he gave her titles, he made her Countess of Mirafiori. The aristocracy in Turin was horrified. They called her the drum major's daughter. They refused to curtsy to her, but the king didn't care.
Why her? With all the royal options in Europe, why Bella Rosin?
Because she was real. She was illiterate, she spoke only the Piedmontese dialect, and she cooked him hearty peasant food. She created a home where he didn't have to be your majesty. He could just be the rough hunting squire that he truly was at heart.
And the public? Did they hate her like the nobles did?
No, and this is the twist. The regular people loved it. Think about the previous rulers of Italy, these stiff, distant Habsburgs in powdered wigs who looked down on everyone.
Right.
Here was a king who smelled like tobacco and horses, who shacked up with a drummer's daughter, and who preferred a plate of agnolotti pasta to a fancy French banquet. He felt authentic.
He was a populist before populism was a thing.
In a way, yes. His flaws made him human. And in a time of revolution, being human was a safer bet than being divine.
He eventually married her. Right.
He did in 1869 when he thought he was dying of an illness, but it was a morganatic marriage.
What does that mean? Morganatic.
It means it's a valid marriage in the eyes of the church, but she does not become queen, she doesn't get the royal title, and any children they have cannot inherit the throne. It was his way of protecting the dynasty while satisfying his conscience.
So let's look at his final years. Rome is the capital. The country is united. What does he do with his time?
He actually fades into the background. His role in day-to-day governing dwindles, and paradoxically, this is one of his greatest contributions.
How so?
Because he wasn't interested in micromanaging, he preferred hunting at his lodge in the Alps. The power shifted from the crown to the parliament. The Constitution technically said ministers answered to the king, but because Victor Emmanuel let them be, they started answering to parliament. He allowed the seeds of parliamentary democracy to grow, largely because he had other hobbies.
That is hilarious. His laziness saved democracy.
Laziness, or perhaps just a clear understanding of his own limitations. He knew he wasn't a policy wonk, so he let the wonks run the country.
He dies in 1878.
In Rome. And there is a final dramatic scene with the church. As he is dying, Pope Pius X, who had been his enemy for decades, who had excommunicated him, sends envoys. The excommunication is reversed.
Really? After all that?
Yes. The Pope allowed him to receive last rites. It was a moment of reconciliation at the very end. The Pope reportedly said something along the lines of, he died as a Christian and a king.
And the burial.
This was a major symbolic decision. The Savoy kings were traditionally buried in the Superga Basilica in Turin. It's this beautiful church on a hill. His family was there. But the government decided to bury Victor Emmanuel II in the Pantheon in Rome.
In the ancient Roman temple.
Exactly. It was the final claim on Rome. Here lies the father of the fatherland in the heart of the ancient empire. It was a message to the Pope and to the world. We are here and we aren't leaving.
So let's circle back to our mission statement. We started with 2 versions of the man. The dishonest imbecile, described by the British, and the father of the fatherland on the monument. After all this, where do you land?
I think he was both. Look, he wasn't an intellectual giant. He certainly wasn't a saint. He was rough, he was cunning, and yes, he was opportunistic. He told lies when it suited him. If you were looking for a philosopher king, he wasn't it.
But
he had the one quality that matters most in a crisis. He didn't quit. Think about 1849. Anyone else would have crumbled. Think about 1859, after the betrayal at Villafranca. He swallowed his pride and kept it going.
He was the anchor.
That's the perfect metaphor. Cavour was the sail. He provided the movement, the direction. Garibaldi was the wind-wild, unpredictable force. But Victor Emmanuel was the heavy anchor. Without his legitimacy, without the royal army, Garibaldi's revolution might have turned into anarchy or a civil war. Cavour's diplomacy might have had no teeth. Victor Emmanuel provided the stability that allowed the Risorgimento to solidify into a state.
That is a really nuanced way to look at it. He didn't have to be a genius. He just had to be the king who stayed in the saddle.
Exactly. And sometimes showing up is 90% of the job.
So next time you see that giant aggressive white monument in Rome, don't just see a marble hero. See a guy who is stressed out, fighting with his prime minister, juggling mistresses, dodging excommunication, and somehow managing to ride the wave of history to create a nation.
A flawed father, but a father nonetheless.
And here is a thought to leave you with. That monument, the Altar della Patria, is often criticized for being too big, too white, too pompous. It stands out awkwardly against the ancient, weathered stones of Rome. But maybe that's perfect. Maybe the monument matches the man, a bit loud, a bit out of place, maybe trying a little too hard to prove he belongs, but undeniably permanently there.
I love that image. It fits him perfectly.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We will catch you on the next one.